If you're not familiar with us, my name is Eric Miller, and I have with me Jordan Gillette
Hello.
and Deck, two veteran youth pastors. Jordan is getting the veteran title simply because he has a very nice beard and
Thank
he's wearing a jacket.
Thank
So
you.
that's about all he's got going for him there.
That's it.
Nick is old enough to be Jordan's dad, and we've got that. So,
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
but we're in for a lot of.
I did live with Nick for a while, so technically that's
All right.
there you go.
Also true.
Good. Well, I am the director of ministry operations with CE National. We've been doing these digital labs. So we're excited about doing another one today and a conversation that we believe will be important, whether you are a parent, a youth pastor, a youth worker. If you know of a teenager, today's conversation is going to be important for you. So we're going to be talking about how do you help students make the most of your time or of their time. And so often, even for us as adults, if we're honest, this can be an important topic for us because even with quarantine and stay-at-home orders and all of this craziness, like how do you make the most of your time? But for students, sometimes in our student ministry, it's very difficult for students to know how to manage their time well, how to have balance in that, if that even exists. So today we've got Jordan and Nick with us. Let me just introduce them a little bit more and kind of give you a rundown on how I know these guys. I'm excited about this because Nick, when I was in middle school, Nick was in high school. When I was in, ninth grade, Nick was a senior. He discipled me. Nick would probably tell you that the whole reason that I am in full-time ministry now is because of him. And he wouldn't be wrong. But
Absolutely. I tell people that all the time. You see that, Eric Miller? I did that.
I did that.
Totally me. Holy Spirit? No.
yeah.
All Nick did.
Yeah. So Nick actually was very influential in my life as a middle school and freshman in high school, especially by discipling me and pouring into me. I remember driving around in your zebra car.
Yes.
Going to
You were the era of the zebra. Absolutely.
Yeah, and just hanging out at the mall and having spiritual conversations. And you would always ask me hard questions and hold me accountable to Bible reading and prayer and sharing my faith. And it was awesome. So I still disciple people and think back to a lot of those moments. So good times. Yeah. Very fun. Jordan, we were just laughing about, we met for the first time when he was on OB as a student, Operation Barnabas. If you're not familiar with that, we're excited that is happening this summer. Woohoo. So Jordan was an Operation Barnabas student in Frederick, England, and he came to our church and I lectured him because I was the youth pastor and he pranked my house.
Can you believe it? The audacity.
That was awesome. That was definitely one of those, I'm going to be stern with these guys, but on the inside, I'm dying laughing and couldn't be more proud. So, yeah.
It happens a lot as a youth.
I did it just to tell a little bit more of the story. I was staying with the senior pastor and his family because I knew them. And so I got to stay with them and they took me to his house. So just so we're all on the same page a little bit about that.
Aren't Deb pranksters. Yeah, I love it. They were probably just jumping at the chance to get back at me for something. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this conversation. Jordan, you said you've been a youth pastor at Grace Community Church there in Goshen for 3.5 years. Nick has been in ministry with students in some capacity for the last 21 years, but he's been on staff. He's now the youth pastor, student ministry pastor at Winona Grace Brethren Church there in Indiana. So I'm excited to have these guys on. Let's dive into our questions here, into our content. For those of you who are watching here with us on Zoom, or if you're watching live on Facebook, make use of the question and answer box down below on Zoom, or comment your questions on Facebook, and we'll get those. We'll see those, and I'll ask these guys whenever they fit within the context of our conversation. So one of the things within this conversation, we originally had started thinking we would talk about this specifically for students, but then we realized quickly that would be an oxymoron because any student who's going to sit down and watch a 30 or 45-minute Zoom conversation with three old guys that they don't really know they're probably the extreme. They're probably
There's something wrong with them. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're either bored or they know how to manage their time very well. So
Go to the first one.
we switched and we thought, let's talk to adults, and let's kind of help think through, why is this an important conversation? I was a youth pastor for 17 years. You guys have been in youth ministry. This topic so often isn't addressed in context of conversation within youth ministry. But I think you guys, obviously, for being willing to be on this call, are thinking that it is something that we need to talk about, that we need to teach. And so there is an importance of having a healthy balance in terms of managing your time, how to prioritize things, decision-making, all of that. I believe it significantly impacts everything in your life, your relationship with God, your relationship with your parents, with your friends, your stress level, your anxiety, all those things. So why is this an important conversation for you guys? And even why did you want to be a part of this conversation today?
I think this is an important conversation, especially now, because obviously we know we're living in a really weird time in the world where students have way more time than they've ever had in their lives. They have sports gone. Some practices are starting up, but still nothing even together. School wasn't a thing for the past 3 months, right? And all these obligations that it used to have thrust upon them, some voluntarily, most involuntarily, were absolutely removed. Students who've literally had nothing to do for months straight. Nothing to do. This is insane. Our country has never experienced anything like this before.
Yeah, and to go along with that, it is such a weird time, and people were just thrust into it. And Nick, we processed this a little bit earlier, but like they didn't have a plan. They were just kind of thrust into this situation. I just talked to a friend over lunch today, actually, and he was like, and he wasn't proud of it, but he was like, I watched 5 whole series on Netflix. Like, I was like, how many episodes was that? And he was like, he started counting. He was like, it was a lot, And I was like, that's, I've had that same conversation with several people kind of over and over. And it's just amazing how we had so much time. But I think when a lot of people are looking back on the last 3 months, 2-3 months, they might not be like proud of what they did or how they used their time. Yep. And Nick has a lot of great stuff to talk about, like about developing a plan we can get to. But like that idea of, man, like I'm not, a lot of people, maybe some people are really proud of what they did and they managed their time well. But like just to think like, man, I didn't succeed great managing my time in the last 2-3 months. Like as we move into the summer and maybe like a schedule's getting normal again, like how can I do that? Like, and even and you said this, Eric, already, but like parents especially, like this is about you modeling it too. Like this, like before you ask your student to like get off their phone and to manage their time better, like take a quick evaluation, be like, how many series did I watch? Did I watch The Office again? Like whatever. And so, yeah, I think that this is a great conversation to have.
Yeah, my son is 3 years old, and if he sees me with my phone in my hand, and I'm not paying attention, he's like, "Hello, Dad!" Like, right. Oh, I mean, he even gets it. So magnify that by 10 with students that they get the dynamics of being on their phone, and yet when they see their parents do it, it's even more magnified.
Right. Right. And I think even before all of this pandemic happened, students, it was the exact opposite. Students were so inundated with activity after activity after activity. It was like, for my student leaders, the ones that are interested and in with their relationship with Christ and with student ministries, my student leaders, we had to meet Sunday mornings when the first service at our church happened, because they literally had no other time throughout the week when they were available, because they were literally doing things from the time they got up to the time they went to bed. So before this pandemic happened, it was the exact opposite. They were so busy that this time management idea was just as important to consider and to think through.
Right. And just I heard a quote today, actually, it was perfect timing. And it said, if you don't create your own version of success, someone else will do it for you. And just the idea of like, hey, like, let's realize that like we're being inundated all the time with information and data, and people are trying to get you to buy stuff, and they're trying to get you to do this and join this and get on this. And like, and if you don't have a plan of your own, if you're not like, if you're not taking control of your life and your path and setting up for success, then you basically will live someone else's success plan. And so that's why we got to have this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see as we come out of this COVID-19 thing and people start to fill their schedules back up. Like, right. I'm sure if they're not already doing it, families, individuals, they're going to be trying to figure out what do we put back into our life,
right? And
evaluating, is that worth it? So I think this timing is impeccable even for having this conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for anyone who has a teenager living in their house, if you're a parent, or if you are a youth worker, you're a youth pastor, you know a teenager, right? What are some key observations that you guys have seen in your students? Generally speaking, we as youth pastors, you know that it's an age-old thing. Heading into the summer months, you normally are trying to think, how do we capitalize on students being more available, or maybe sometimes it looks like they're less available because they stay up all day or all night and they sleep all day. But what are some of the
maybe other people's students, but not my students?
Yeah, Nick's students, not mine.
Nick's students.
Yeah,
totally, absolutely.
But yeah, what are the key trends or observations, key factors that you guys have seen in your students?
I think a lot of my students, I started talking before I had it all ready to go, but the idea of like community, like they want community, right? Like, and they're no different from anyone else in that way. Like they want community, but oftentimes we look for community in the wrong places. And so we, maybe we don't invest in like chat groups or small groups or something like that. But we're on social media a lot, or we're doing things to try to get community, and to go with like in the summer months and that kind of thing. I think people like fill their schedules with stuff that they think, they think will make them happy. They think that they'll bring stuff, and it's good stuff. Like very rarely is it like bad stuff. Like joining a travel baseball team is not a bad thing. Joining, the football team and getting ready or band or whatever, like those aren't bad things. But if you add this on top of this, on top of your job, on top of this, then that's when it starts to compound. And I in a book, 12 ways your phone changes you, Tony Reiki says, I don't have time to kill, I have time to redeem. And I love that. Like that is like, I was like, oh, I'm bored. I don't have enough to do. Like, well, you don't have time to kill. You have time to redeem. Like we can use our time in all sorts of different ways.
And I think I've seen that same thing where this deep desire for students to connect and to have community, but they're doing it in the easiest way possible, which currently is through technology, and actually the least life-giving. So they're seeking after this community. They're going after connections and relationships, but they're doing it in really easy, simple ways, which is the opposite. So it feels like they're having community, but as we all know, it's kind of the worst. And we can cite all kinds of things left and right about using social media, like directly correlates with depression, anxiety, suicide rates, all this stuff, right? We know that's fact. That's not debated anymore at all. So we see students craving community, but going about it the easiest way possible, which isn't actually life-giving.
Right.
Like Jordan said, they're stacking up these things that could be life-giving, and because there's so many, it just smashes in on itself, and students become overwhelmed, over busied, and can't life anymore because there's simply too much to do that they've committed to.
Right. And just again, to go back to this, I think we should go back to this a bunch. Like that's been modeled for them, right? Like
yes,
whether it was like their parents or older siblings being really busy, or like getting signed up for a bunch of different stuff. Like And again, all good things. Like no one's like baseball's the devil. Like that's not what we're going for. Well, Nick, we'll talk about that later. But like no, like normally like marching bands like not bad, but it's just like the stacking and stacking and stacking. And to go with what Nick said, there's a really good book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I would highly recommend it. It's intense, it's hard, but it's good. And in it, John Mark Comer, the author, he says like no one ever gets off Instagram after scrolling like for 30 minutes or 45 minutes. They don't get off and they're like, oh, I just feel so good and connected to people, right? Like, have you ever done that? You're like, no, like you just compared yourself to your friend's best vacation and to what they were doing over here. And they have the best job and, oh man, they're so fit. And like the celebrities are doing this. And like, and I'm going to post something now of the best part of my life to try to get, and like the only part that feels good about Instagram sometimes is like the likes you get or like the connection you get. Sometimes it's not all bad, but it depends on like what your goal is with social media. So anyway, just to say that like we got to model the right thing.
Yeah. And I think even if there's any parents listening or youth pastors, I think we have to remember, one, as youth pastors, it's our primary job to equip parents to disciple their own kids. Our job to also disciple students, but biblically speaking, it's the parents' job primarily to disciple their kids. And it's our job to equip them to do that. And so when we model that for our students and when we equip our parents to have conversations with their kids and say, okay, you want to do marching band or you want to be on the basketball team? Okay, let's biblically think about this. Are you willing to commit 6 hours a day of basketballing for the next 7 days every day for the next, how long is basketball season? Like 6 months or something?
It's a bit.
Like, it's a long time, right? Like, are you willing to commit to that? And if so, what are you having to set aside to make that a priority? And if you are making that a priority, how are you doing that in a way that honors Christ? How are you pursuing basketball in a godly way where it doesn't become an idol of your heart and you can actually exemplify Christ with your attitude to your teammates, the way you treat and handle your coach, what happens when you lose, A, B, C, and D. Like, it help our students and our parents explore all of these things.
Right.
Instead of just a kid saying, Mom, Dad, I want to be in the basketball team. Okay, cool. Sign up. Here's $100 to do it. Like, that's terrible. That is.
Do you guys think before the pandemic, as youth pastors, did you see patterns like this where students would just sign up for things and they would pack it all in? They would just try and do anything or everything that they could do. And then they would have like a break that have like Christmas break or that have summer break and they just shut it all off. And it's like they go into like hibernation mode for several or a weekend where they don't have anything and they don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Did you guys see that?
Absolutely. They would just crash. Well, think about it like this. We've all, a lot of us have been to college. And it's like, when you come home from college on college break, you shut down. Most college students get sick because their bodies just shut down. It's the way with our teenagers, with our students that we're seeing. Their things are so full when they finally get a break. They're so unhealthy that they just shut down and can't handle anything else, whether it's life-giving or not, because the most life-giving thing they can do is lay in their bed and be unconscious for 3 weeks straight. Like that's not okay. It's not okay.
And I think it's in those moments where things are shut off and routine is different, where then you tend to fall into temptation. You tend to make bad choices. You tend to then do things that, are you're going to regret later in some way, shape, or form. So I really think that we need to recognize that routine is good, the rhythm of our life is good, but there's got to be health and there's got to be balance, right?
Absolutely.
I'm joked that last year was the year that I learned like all the cliches were true. Like all cliches are true for a reason. And like one of those for me was if you put everything in your calendar, you'll have more time. And I hated that idea because I didn't want to be confined to a schedule, But like I put when I exercise, I put like these are when I have meetings. This is when I'm going to work on lesson prep. Like I put everything in the calendar, and that way I was able to. Someone want to set something up, or I want to set something up. I was like, well, this is when I'm free. And it actually, it feels so much better. But that has to take planning. That has to take intentionality. It has to take routine. Yeah. And it's fascinating how much and I mean, if you mess up a routine for a day or for a week, you can get back on it. It's fine. But I feel that when I start my day off wrong, or I start my week off wrong, I'm like, oh boy, I feel that tension. I feel we were talking about this earlier, Colossians 3, at the beginning of it says, "Since you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things." And I desire that for myself so much, is to and this is probably more where I'm speaking, obviously out of the love for my students specifically. But I want my students, and I want to live the best life I can and the fullest life I can, so that I can be used by God. And man, it's all about your focus. If I could go back to that first quote I said, if you don't create your own version of success, someone else will set it for you. And so you got to take that intentionality.
Yeah. And I think what it comes back to for me repeatedly with students is is it about managing time? Yes. But that's really a symptom of what's going on in our hearts.
Yes. Oh, this is good. This is good.
I want to read Isaiah 44 verses. Well, I'll give you a little bit of a background. It's God talking to the Israelites, big surprise, about their idol worship, right? And what they're struggling with when it comes to this stuff. I'm gonna start reading it at verse 12, and I'll skip ahead a little bit. "But the blacksmith takes a tool and works with it in the coals. He shapes an idol with hammers. He forges it with the might of his right arm. He gets hungry and loses his strength. He drinks no water and grows faint. The carpenter measures with a line and makes an outline with a marker. He roughs it out with chisels and marks it with a compass." So it just goes through all these details of someone making an idol, something that they are literally going to worship. They are making it themselves, right? It has no power. And then skip ahead a little bit to verse 17. "For the rest, he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships. He prays to it and said, 'Save me, you are my God.' These idols, they know nothing. They understand nothing. Their eyes are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds closed so they cannot understand. No one stops to think. No one has the knowledge or understanding to say, 'Half that I used for fuel. I even baked bread over it in its coals. I roasted meat and I ate. Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left?'" It's talking about the wood used to make these idols, right? They cook over it, they warm themselves with it, and then they use the rest to make an idol. It's just stuff, right? There's no power in it. And then I love the way this section ends out. It says, "Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left? Shall I bow down to a block of wood? Such a person feeds on ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot save himself or say, 'Is this thing in my right hand not a lie?'" How can this be more timely? We make such idols out of anything in our lives all the time that we focus on it. Do we literally bow down and worship our phones? Maybe, kind of, actually. I did a series on technology and kind of this idea of time management with my students a couple of years ago. And we talked about that idea. If the first thing you do when you wake up is roll over and grab this thing, and you're doing this, is that not an object of worship? If it's the last thing you do before bed,
right,
rule about this thing, and you're texting this stuff and looking at the things, is that not an idol of worship?
Right.
What's going on with your heart? These things are lifeless. It's lifeless. It has no power, yet we give it all this power and all of our attention and all our time. Or whether it's basketball, or whether it's video games, or whether it's comic books, or whether it's our job. We have to be so careful because this isn't evil. It's an object. It can't do anything on its own accord. It's how I choose to use it. and whether or not it becomes an idol of my heart.
Yes.
And I have to be honest with myself and look at how I'm using these tools that God has created and given us. How am I using them to glorify God or to glorify myself? Those are the only two options.
Yep.
Either it's glorifying God or it's sin. That's it. There's no middle ground that's kind of neutral, like the Beach Boys, right? Oh, it's okay. It's just not singing nothing bad or good. Like, no, it's either glorifying God or it's not.
That's really good. Yeah, I think Nick, you're starting even to go there, but kind of expound on that idea of like, what are some of these factors? Technology is for sure one, but what are factors that negatively influence our teenagers in their time management? I mean, I would also argue that it's our own selfish desires. When you were quoting scripture in Colossians 3, great passage, but and now I can't even think of the reference, but the passage that talks about that it's our own selfish desires that lead us away, and
James,
we're enticed. Yeah, thank you. And that sin leads to death. And so it's a slippery slope. Like when I fall into selfishness and think about only things that I want to do, well, then there goes my routine. There goes getting up in the morning to spend time in the Word. There goes my prayer life. What are some other things that you guys have seen that negatively affect, especially teenagers, in time management?
Yeah. I'm going to go out on a limb here and maybe take some flack for this, but like we've said before, adults that are modeling it negatively. Primarily, the primary adult in a kid's life is their parents. If we as parents, I have a foster daughter now. If myself as a parent, if I'm not modeling it well, why would I expect my kid to do any better? If I don't know how to handle or manage my own time and be purposeful in modeling that for my kid, where are they going to learn it? Because their peers aren't going to do it, right? Like, I think a primary factor in this is parents.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. And it's even more convoluted now when most parents are working from home,
right,
and working remotely. And so how do you know when to turn it off?
Yeah.
Dedicate time. It all can get very confusing. Yeah. You have to be aware of that.
We like, as a culture, we just don't set good boundaries. Like we don't, and with anything, I mean, really anything. But like technology, like Ellie Rauch, who you had on here a couple of weeks ago for a panel, her family, I don't remember what time it is, but every night at a certain time, everyone who has a phone puts it in a basket in their kitchen, and then they're just done with their phone for the night. And I've talked to her dad about that, and he's like, we wanted to give our kids and ourselves like a break from people. Like we grew up with a natural break. Like we went home and we weren't connected to the world, unless they like called on our landline.
Yeah.
We had a wireless landline, just bragging a little bit, but
they're so fancy.
It was so fancy, but like we weren't connected, but now like we're connected, like they're connected. Everyone's connected all the time unless you set up boundaries. But that goes to scheduling. That goes with technology. Nick and we both love video games. And if we stray a little bit from your question, Eric, please set us back up. Like, and we both love like shows. Like I really love superhero shows and
oh my goodness.
And like, so I really love The Office, but like I've watched The Office probably 6 or 7 times, like the whole thing. And like, do I really need to watch it like an 8th time? Like, like do I, and there's certain times that we kind of talked, like, it's okay to binge certain things. Like, you take a break, you go on a vacation. Like Nick and I and our families, we went on a vacation a couple of years ago, and like we played a ton of Minecraft. And
it was awesome.
It was awesome. It was so much fun. But like, if I'm like now like with kids and like need to be in the office at a certain time, and being like, if I'm staying up till 3 every night playing Minecraft, or for students who have a job, like are you giving your best to your job if you have to be there at 8 and you're up till 4? Like we want to honor God with everything. Like if you're a Christ follower, you should want to honor God with your job, with your sport, with whatever you're doing. That's the goal I have. And so to do that, like I need to get more than 3 hours of sleep. And statistics show that most people do, Jim Brown doesn't, but that's beside the point. Like that's my boss, for anyone who doesn't know. So I think like there's a time and a place for everything. I don't think, video games are sinful. I don't think Netflix is sinful. I mean, but it's like what you allow. Like, did you watch 5 series over the last 2 months? Like maybe that's an idol in your life. Like maybe, do you stay up every night and miss out on community because you're sleeping through the day and missing out on time with your family? Maybe you need to reshape that a little bit.
Yeah, I think this idea that, well, and also to show that I'm not perfect at this at all, but so my foster daughter is pregnant, and we're talking about the bridal shower. The baby shower coming up. They both start with B in their shower. Yeah. One of those shower things. The baby shower coming up, and my daughter was like, "Oh yeah, Dad'll probably come and be like, well, nice baby shower. See, you got to go to work." And I thought, oh, like is that how she sees me? Like, am I really working that much? Like, So, like we all have to check ourselves regularly.
Right.
Sure. Even if I know I'm only like working 50 hours a week or whatever, when I'm not working, I need to be purposeful in pursuing my daughter, in pursuing my wife, so that they have the best of my time as well. And it's not just all going to work. Or as a student, it's just not all going to basketball, or it's not all going to social media. Because here's something that I think about and get really convicted of sometimes. It's God's time that he is allowing me to use. Today, I am going to have to stand before him and answer for how I use that time. Am I going to want to stand before God and say, yeah, not to pick on The Office, Jordan, am I going to want to be able to say, yeah, God, I watched through The Office 8 times. Isn't that awesome? Thanks for all that time.
Aren't you so proud of me?
Oh my goodness. Or am I going to be able to say, like, yeah, I did the best I could with the time you gave me. Right. Did I take appropriate breaks and Sabbaths and have downtime? Absolutely. That is biblical. We should be doing that. But when God gave us as a country these 3, 4, 5 months of downtime, how did we use that? What did we do with it? Students, what did you do to glorify God with your friendships when you worked? Like the more tired we are, the more whatever we are, because we're staying up till 3 a.m. watching who knows what, or to be honest, just probably staring at your phone doing nothing. We go to work, we go to our family, we go to people exhausted, tired, worn out, grumpy, annoyed. That's not exemplifying Christ. That's not representing him well at all. And if we're followers of Christ, we're called to represent him in all areas of our life. Now, are we going to do that perfectly all the time? Absolutely not. But if we're constantly doing things to hinder that image of God as we present Christ to people around us, that's not okay. And we really need to stop and get a handle on what's going on in our own hearts, that we think this time is ours, that we can do whatever we want with it and live selfishly instead of putting God and others first.
Another passage that came to mind, and this is from like a, pulling one verse out of a book of the Bible, but it's in 2 Corinthians 10 and 1 through 5 talks a couple things, and 5 says, we demolish arguments and every presentation that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And a lot of times we use that verse like about purity and like take every thought captive, but like I think, and we've talked about this before, like that applies to so many more things than just like purity. Like that applies to like, all right, like what am I going to do like with my time? Like how do I feel about that? Like I'm starting to feel angry or like, or even like emotional, like how things affect us. And like, oh man, like it probably shouldn't affect me like that. Probably shouldn't respond the way I'm thinking or feeling right now. And just to kind of go along with that, like we need to slow down and just take every thought captive, not just like certain thoughts captive, but like let every thought like kind of process through and see if it's honoring Christ.
Yeah, I think it's really good. What I'm hearing you guys say is it's so much about what's your mental focus, and what are the things that we're filling our minds with.
Right.
And so if you can quote lines from The Office or your favorite movie, yeah, and yet you don't know scripture,
right?
And like, well, then there it is.
Right.
If your mental image is filled with images on Instagram or the celebrities that you follow or the clothes that you want, or if those are things that are consuming the forefront of your mind rather than the relationships that you need to invest in, or the God honoring, like Nick, I love what you're saying, like how we can leverage things for the gospel and how we can have an impact, how God wants to use us in that. That's important.
Right.
So let's kind of take all of that now and turn a corner here, because I think in so many times in these conversations, there's a tension between a student perspective and adult perspective. I don't know. Let's just call it parents and their teenagers. Like,
hypothetically,
how do we speak into that where parents feel like it's sinful to stay up all night? Parents would maybe take a hard line or a hard stance and say, you've got to go to bed on time. You can't play video games for more than an hour. Parents are going to put boundaries and guidelines, and that's not a bad thing. But if they're not connected to some of these things that we're talking about, the healthy reasons why, then from a student's perspective, it doesn't connect. It doesn't make sense. So how would you guys encourage parents or youth pastors to speak into that tension?
I think defining, thank you. I think defining a purpose, like what is your purpose? And parents, youth leaders, like you got to, again, to go back to the beginning, you got to define this for yourself. Like, what is my purpose for watching Netflix tonight? Like, is it just to binge out? Is it because I'm tired? Is it because I'm really stressed? Is it like, should I be doing anything else that would actually like fill me up better? Or is it like totally fine? Like, again, video games, Netflix, they're not innately sinful, but like processing that with your students of like, hey, like you love playing Fortnite and like, why do you love it? And like, and they might have good reasons. Like I play with some of my students and like they play pretty late, but like it's community and like they're on together and they're playing together, they're being together, like, but it helped them process that. Like, well, it's less about Fortnite and actually more about community. Like we're together, we're playing Minecraft together, we're, whatever. So like kind of working the purpose of certain things. So like, why do you want me to read? Why do you want me to go to bed on time? Like give them like, cause I said so, like, that's not a great, like, that's fine and whatever, but like help, like, well, like I want you to be healthy and we have this thing coming up and you have these responsibilities and I would like it if you got these done at a certain time. Nick, actually, we were talking about how to leverage technology and like, Nick, you should talk about you can actually like be a contribution, like in case, sorry again, to sidetrack Eric, but like in case students are watching, like parents, you probably shouldn't say this to your students. Let Nick say it for you.
Well, but that actually builds into what I was going to say perfectly. So well done. It's like we talked ahead of time. But Eric, to your question, I think as parents and as adults, as youth pastors, if we aren't explaining why rules are there,
yes,
then don't bother. Don't bother. There's one thing I learned as an undergrad at Grace College and Theological Seminary. In one of my youth ministry classes, boom.
Well played.
Boom, just made $50. I didn't. Or did I? But it's the saying, rules without relationship result in rebellion. Every time. I've been working with students 21 years. Every time this is the case, right? So parents, as leaders, as youth pastors, if we're not explaining why in the context of relationship, these rules matter and why they're in place and why these expectations are there will be rebellion against them. And even if we explain it, there might be rebellion at first, but generally it's been my experience that at some point they'll come around. Athena and I sit down with our daughter and we explain. We don't just have like, okay, here's the rules of our house. We explain, here's the rules of our house and why, and how it has your safety and your well-being first and foremost, and explain and walk that through. So I think that is probably the most powerful thing that can be done, is explaining why these rules are in place and guidelines are there for their benefit and for the household's benefit and the household's purpose, because they're not a lone entity in that house. They're not the only person there. They often think they are, and they might feel like they are, but the reality is they're not. And that plays into what Jordan was talking about. I think, what would it have looked like if in this pandemic season, a student would have decided to teach themselves how to cook? And like say, I'm going to learn how to make stuff. I can make my own food while my parents are away, or I can cook dinner for them sometimes. Like I did a little math right here, and it's probably wrong, but if a student would have like started studying something for like 3 hours a day, just a couple of days a week, they could have easily put like 90 to like 100 hours of learning whatever they wanted into this pandemic time. They could have like almost become like a master chef, right? I don't know what it takes. But what if they become a productive member of the household instead of just always consuming? Right. And we often as parents and adults let them do that because, let's be real, it's easier than teaching them how to do it and like take that time. But if a student could like learn how to make grilled cheese, learn how to make scrambled eggs, learn how to make your macaroni and cheese, figure out how to like make spaghetti, and maybe cook dinner for your family once a week. Like that would be incredible. What a way to honor them, right? And like be a benefit to the community that you live in. And I think that really represents Christ well by taking on some of the responsibilities of your community and loving your parents back in that way and being thankful by demonstrating that for them.
That's well said, Nick. I think that's very well said. I mean, what parent's dream isn't for their kids to like start making them dinner? Isn't that why parents have kids, for them to do stuff? No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you a practical thing on this. I've got 2 students that graduated last year. They're incredible. And they have a passion for like Korean food. And so they literally taught themselves how to make Korean. And they make Korean meals for their family a couple times a month. And these students came over recently, when that was allowed, I promise, when it was okay. And they cooked dinner for me and my wife. Like that was awesome. And because they saw the value of it and they saw how they could appreciate their family and love them in that way, they chose to learn and teach themselves how to cook Korean food. Like that's incredible. That is so cool. I was so proud of those guys.
I think a lot of students have, I mean, not even like spiritually speaking, like we could preach about like, hey, you should have spent like 3 hours in your Bible a day, and you should have done this, and only listen to worship music and whatever, only watch The Chosen. But there's lots of practical steps too, like for being members of society. Like you could do Code Academy at your own pace and learn how to code, like, and just have like a basic skill and like check it out to see if you enjoy coding. You could learn how to do design work with like what if you on your phone, like there's apps on your phone where you can like practice and basic stuff, or on your computer. And there's tons of YouTube videos of how to do that. Like there's ways to redeem our time and not just to kill it, not just to like play like gobs and gobs of hours of video games and watch The Office again. You can do some of that, sure, and it's fine. But like, don't you want to redeem your time? Like when you look back at your life in 5 years, like what do you wish you will have invested in your life leading up to that point, right? Like, yeah, think of what you could know. Think of how you what you could do.
Yeah, I think that's such a good thought of like to ask yourself like, okay, as I evaluate the time that I'm spending, is it worth something? Am I better for how I spent that time, or is it more of a detriment to me in some way, shape, or form because of how it impacts my mind, my emotions, what I do, the decisions that I make? I think that's important. So we're almost out of time here, and I know we'll probably have some questions rolling in here. But one last question I want to make sure that we get to. We talked about those negative factors and the influences in our students in when it comes to time, decision making, all of that. What are some positives? What are some of those positive factors that you've seen students that they've done in decision making, and when it comes, how do they spend their time?
I think the same thing with what I said before is parents. When parents are setting that good example and having those conversations, I've seen absolutely change students' lives. It is an incredible positive influence that absolutely exemplifies Christ in the household. It is wonderful to see that. It's so encouraging. And some of those students are some of the best, sharpest students that I've encountered because they've seen that and gleaned that from their parents. So absolutely, parents can be the most positive impact as well.
Yeah, I think I mean I've seen students use technology really well to build community, and to be connected to each other, and whether that's different text groups or playing games online together or whatever. I think like the community aspect is there and can be there, but like it needs to be like a tangible, like actual thing, not just like double tapping a picture on a screen and moving on and just keep scrolling. And so there, yeah. And I have seen students and people, redeem their time, like learning to do things like we were talking about. Like Nick's students are a great example of that, but and even like trying reading, like just trying different things, like trying. So where I'm in a couple Bible reading plans with some of my students, and like that's like one of my favorite things is like they invited me to it. It's a daily thing. They've been so consistent. They're like, hey, I got a 100-day streak like on the Bible app. Like that's awesome. Like, and so there's definitely ways if we slow down and figure out like, hey, let's make a plan and redeem our time a little bit.
So we as a church have a Bible reading plan. Like at the church we have one. And since the pandemic has started, one way we've been connecting with students is on our student Instagram. We have our students read out loud in like a little video, the daily Bible reading, and encourage other students to read along with them. And I love that. It's a way to utilize technology to point students in the right direction of what does it mean to use their time well, especially when it comes to learning scripture and focusing our hearts on Christ and self-examination that we need to be doing daily as Christians.
That's awesome. So one of the questions that just kind of came in, and I'll even put it in this context, like for you guys as youth pastors, when you have, parents who are listening to this and they're saying like, all of these are wonderful things, but how do we encourage our students to do these things?
I think Nick said it. He entered it really well. Like, tell the why, like, and the purpose. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. I mean, doesn't that make just a ton of sense? And so like, lay it out real clearly. Like, and even if they don't agree with it, they'll at least know the why. Like, it's not just like because I said so. It's like, well, why do I have to put my phone in at 10 o'clock? Like, my friends are going to text me after 10 o'clock. It's like, well, we want you to have time to mentally slow down. Like and just these studies show this, like just do any Google, just Google like phone after 10. Is it good? And I'm sure you'll find something that will help you make that decision. So, but I really do think like explaining and having a conversation and not just being like, this is what, but like be firm, like you're still the parent, still the guardian,
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
maybe that's even a good check, because if you don't have a reason and it's just a rule and it's something
That's so good, Eric. Yeah.
I'm going to put my foot down on because I'm in charge, well, then, you've got to search your own heart in that.
That's so good.
And there are certainly those times, right? But if that's ongoing and you're not sure why and you can't explain it,
Yeah.
then do you have that relationship side?
Right. And again, just to circle back, if you were to make the 10 o'clock rule and you don't put your phone up at 10 o'clock, then they're going to ask why you get to keep your phone after 10. So like,
absolutely.
But think about it for you too. Like, do you want to live a full life? Do you want to be present? Do you want to be connected to your family? So yeah. And youth pastors model it, parents, guardians model it.
Great.
Yeah. I think one of the best things also to do is anytime, just to reiterate what Jordan said, any sort of boundaries, hold yourself to those same standards. Don't ever place yourself above those standards. As a youth pastor, I strive to do that. If there's a rule about, like we were at Momentum a couple summers ago, and where our youth group was meeting, there was a big old sign on the wall, like no food was allowed in the room we were in, right? And like, I think Dave Rank even came by, bless his soul, with a bunch of extra pizzas for something afterwards, and like brought him in. And I was like, I looked at Dave, who was like right next to the sign on the wall, and he didn't know, he's being kind. And I was like, Dave, sorry, you have to take that outside. And all the kids were like, what? Like, we're not allowed to have food in here. Like that's what the sign says, and they're letting us use this place.
Right.
I'm not going to break that rule.
And my kids are young, so it's different, and you can, you could say that to me, but at Momentum, my first year, I had our church was known as a little rebellious and loud, and they snuck out all the time at night and just did harmless things. But like, I had a talk with them about, like, guys, like, don't do that. And then when they did and they got caught, I was like, you promised me you wouldn't. Like, you broke your word. Like, how can I trust you? And it was like, I can think of several students followed up with me about that. But one is now like one of my best youth staff members, and she's amazing, and she loves our students so well. But it was like this big moment of like you just broke my trust. Like and I explained like the relationship and I explained the why. Yeah. And then when it happened, I could go back and be like, come on, like, we agreed on this, or like, I asked you to do this, you said okay, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. All right. One other question that came in. What are some key passages that you guys have found particularly helpful when it comes to having these conversations? We talked about a couple, but any others that will come to your mind, or ones that you've used before?
I mean, Romans 12, 1 and 2 is one I wrote down as well. I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a sacrifice. But then verse 2, don't conform to the patterns of this world. I mean, we think, and we could look at the context of that passage and be like, oh, those are Romans and they were going this way and their culture was so like, but yeah, don't we just conform to the patterns of our world? Like, who says, like, we don't have to stay up on the latest shows. You don't have to get the new game. You don't have to get the newest phone. Like, you don't have, like, that's the pattern, right? Like, what difference is this iPhone to last year's iPhone? Like you'll be okay if you wait a couple years. But instead we just conform to the pattern of the world. So I think, that definitely is one of me.
Yeah. I'm such a fan of the Old Testament. And I think that Isaiah 44, and I believe it's also in Isaiah 45. I'm going to pull up and check right now. But that passage, because it continues to talk about idols and how those that worship idols become like them. When that's our primary focus, our goal, like it talks about how these people that worship idols that are deaf and mute and powerless, you become very spiritually deaf and mute and powerless.
Yes.
And you become insensitive to the Spirit, and you become insensitive to people around you. You become so self-focused that spiritually you're blind, deaf, and dumb, even though you claim to be a follower of Christ. But because you've been worshiping something that is lifeless, you become lifeless. And I love that passage in Isaiah that explains that out very clearly in some pretty drastic ways about what God has to say about that when we do things like that.
Eric, can I recommend just a couple resources? Is that
Yeah, please.
This book, it's 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You, by Tony Reiki. It was just, it's incredible. I think every parent should read it. I think every person should read it. But like, and then Enjoy Your Prayer Life by Michael Reeves. It's $10. It might even be less than that. It's really short. I use it as like a devotional in the morning. It's like 2 pages a chapter, but just so rich with like good practical stuff. And this one's all about like technology and stuff. And the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, the one I mentioned by John Mark Comer. It was revolutionary to me. I read it at the same time as a couple of friends, and we all were just like, can you believe this stuff? Like, this is so good. And so I actually want, like, something Nick and I talked about recently was another kind of fun thing during this time is maybe to simplify your life. And that means like maybe go through your closet and like get rid of some stuff and like maybe just, kind of not like go full minimalist, but like check out some of those ideas and simplify your life as to focus on God. And so as a kind of a fun game, if I can do this, the first like two people that email me or message me, like a bag that they're going to give to Goodwill, I'll send you a copy of this book. It's really, really good. And I love
email Jordan. I'm going to just
it's yeah, right. Yeah.
I got a bag of stuff right here.
I got right now. So it's so good. I'd love for more people to read it.
Yeah. I think one more, if I can offer one more practical thing here. As families are starting to re-engage with everything like you're talking about, Eric, I think it would be great for families to take an honest look at how things have been the past 3 months. What have they liked about this extra time they've had as a family?
What they didn't like.
Hang on to. And what have they realized? Wow, what we were involved with was a kind of a waste of time. I'm so glad we're not doing it anymore. So let's not get involved with it again, right? Make smart boundaries. Don't just jump back into things. Like, talk about it as a family. And just because one family member really liked it, and if the rest see it as a negative, that means you shouldn't engage with it, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like if it takes up too much time or whatever it is, if it takes up too much family resource, I mean, it's not valuable enough to really pursue and invest in. But I really want to encourage families and parents and students to honestly critique how these months have been and to figure out what they really want to invest in purposefully going forward, not just jumping into everything willy-nilly again. Because it's so dangerous. This consumer mindset is so dangerous. And I have one book that I want to recommend. I couldn't remember the title, so I asked my wife, and my technology tells me she's typing right now. She gave me a warning. It's heavy on evolution talk. But it's about sleep and like the purpose of sleep and the absolute value of sleep, and that we are killing ourselves as Americans with our lack of sleep and our poor sleep.
That doesn't sound right.
Oh my goodness. So I don't remember the title, but I'm sorry, it was heavy on evolution apparently, because it's written from a
Google that.
Perspective, but its research on sleep was paramount. So you should get some more sleep. There you go. Let's just say that.
Nick said
right there. Now I don't have to buy another book.
Yep.
Summed it up.
Sorry, we went long, Eric.
No, this is super helpful. I think I honestly think that we need to be having more of these conversations. That's exactly why I thought this is a perfect time to have this conversation within youth ministry, within ministry in general, and within the context of our families. And so these are things that I hope, if you're watching this, I hope that you've stuck with us. I hope that you have some great takeaways from all of this, and that you would pray through what are the things that God might be pressing on your heart that you can evaluate. And for you, your spouse, your kids, your students that you impact in your ministry, that you be blessed because of this conversation. So, Nick, why don't you just even close us in prayer and pray for those of us who are watching this video.
Heavenly Father, thank you that you have given us a time as a nation to step back and really analyze and to see and kind of have, in some ways, for some of us as a nation, a forced Sabbath. God, thanks for that opportunity to be honest and to critique ourselves and our use of time. God, thanks also that we do have such incredible technology that when a pandemic happens, we're not just bowing to our own household, but we can still reach out to family and friends and loved ones around the globe. What an incredible gift you've given us. God, I do ask that you would help us to be real as we begin to re-engage with society, re-engage with school activities as they're going to be starting up soon in the next couple of weeks or months. Help us to be honest with ourselves and to analyze our own hearts about what we're seeking as we're doing these things, and how can we be best representing you to the communities around us and the people around us, to our spouses, our kids, our siblings, whatever it is, God. How can we honor you with the time that you have given us, knowing that one day, as a follower of Christ, we will stand before you today and be held accountable for how we use the time that you gave us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Man.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Nick and Jordan, for joining us. We have some upcoming digital labs that we're excited about that we would hope that you would join us for. If you found value in this video and even in this conversation, we would love for you to share it on your social media, or even talk it through with others on your team, within your youth ministry, or use it within your parent ministry. We want, as CE National, continue to provide resources that would help you to be effective at living on mission. We've got another digital lab coming up on Monday, June 15th at 11 a.m. And we're going to be talking with Tim and Janine Lansing and Andrea Farron on identity. How do you help students understand their identity in Christ? And then on the 18th at 2 p.m., we've also got one coming up on how do you start a student-led ministry. And so if you're a youth pastor maybe that's new, or you've always kind of had that idea, we're going to be talking with Fletcher Abbott and Angie Dallavalli from my home church in Frederick, Maryland, about exactly that and how do you do that. So we're excited about those. We'll be continuing to do more of these throughout the summer, aiming to do one digital lab a week. And we also really would encourage you to check out the Build Momentum website and social media, because we have some exciting things coming up. While we were not able to do Momentum as we know and love, we're all very sad and disappointed about that. We're going to take Momentum on the road, and so we're going to come to you and your city. So be checking out for the dates and all the details on that, and the exact locations coming up soon. So on behalf of Nick and Jordan and CE National, thanks guys for checking in. We're signing off. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.